Good morning, everyone. We are kicking off our first panel of the day, and I'm super excited. This is the Artist as Activist panel, and we have a really terrific lineup of artists and activists who are going to be speaking today with Michael Gill, who is the founder and chief editor of the Can Journal. He's going to tell you more about himself and our guests. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things. Please, if you want to ask a question or make a comment, use the chat feature. And you want to make sure that you're in the session chat. And then we can incorporate your comments into the conversation. We are providing closed captioning for this. If you would like to minimize your screen, tap twice in that screen and it will reduce it. Without any further ado, I'm going to turn this session over to Michael Gill.
Well, thank you, Amy Rosenbluth, and thanks to all the people on the panel for joining us in the conversation. I guess very briefly, we'll tell you a little bit about myself. Honestly, I don't consider myself an activist. I sort of came to the art world by accident. I consider myself a writer, and writing led me to a lot of other things, including the art world, but also anything that I've done that could be considered active or organizing. What brings me here really is I started the Can Journal, which stands for Collective Arts Network Journal. And that is a group of art galleries that a grassroots organization that decided that in order to get attention in the world, in order to spread the word about their activities, they should pool resources and work together to make their own media outlet. There wasn't enough coverage, there wasn't enough public discussion about the arts about 10 years ago. And so this project evolved out of simply meetings, a series of conversations called the SALT Talks, which were organized by my friend Liz Moggins at Zygote Press. And the galleries and art organizations participating in the SALT Talks decided to build their own tool, to make their own solution to communicate with the world about their programs, which were educational programs, opportunities to create exhibition opportunities, and so on. And so by working together, we made this magazine, which is called Can Journal. We're about to begin our 10th year, and you can find it in a couple hundred locations around town, giving voice to the art scene in Northeast Ohio. And I guess I talked that much about that because of the other people and the range of different pursuits that are sort of represented on this panel. In the world of arts activism, and in particular, arts activism, in the world of activism, and in particular in the world of arts activism, there are a lot of different roles. There's different ways that people can be active. And we have a range of those represented on this panel. By the different roles, you can practice activism as an arts administrator, which is sort of my role. My work is to make that magazine happen on behalf of other people. You can practice art activism as an artist through the content, for example, by your messaging. And there's one great example of that, which is behind me. This poster was made by my friend, Kate Snow, who actually printed that at Zygote Press. She printed hundreds and hundreds of them and took them to Washington, D.C. for a march, I think a couple years ago now, and distributed them to the crowd. She put them all over the place. And those messages, they get amplified because they get picked up in press coverage and so on. So Kate's role was as an artist making content relevant to the cause that she was working on. And so I wanted to ask the people on my panel, Deidre and Gina and Jim, who I don't see right now. There you are, Jim. And James Quarles, to talk about your role and how you practice. So talk a little bit about your work. Deidre, would you get us started down that road?
Hi, everyone. First off, thank you to Amy Rosenbluth and everyone at Lake Erie Inc. for inviting me to participate in this panel, and just for this, marvelous event, Comic-Con, and thank you, Michael, for moderating. I am a Cleveland Heights native, and I left Cleveland for many years and came back in 2008. And I came back after getting a degree in marketing, an MBA, and I was working at the Cleveland Orchestra. And I learned quickly that as I left that job after a few years and working at a marketing capacity, I started a passion project in my spare time that was called Sister Cinema. That was in 2012, and it lasted until 2017. And Sister Cinema was a film program that I started that showcased films by and about queer women of color. And so that was the first time I had ever been acknowledged, if you will, as an activist. And it was simply by being myself and recognizing a need that I had and a need that my community had for convening. And I learned through that experience how much I loved creating those spaces for people to gather and to convene and to learn from one another and to connect with one another, spaces where that just the event that I was organizing, Sister Cinema, wasn't happening, and it was a much needed space, a much needed event that grew very quickly and very organically because of that. And so that was, I think, activism is something that should be seen on a spectrum, and we all have a role to play. And there's much work to do. It takes a village. And so I've since worked in a few other arts organizations. Sister Cinema, an event that was started by a Black queer woman in another city that I picked up the torch and brought it to Cleveland. That led the way for me to work in other arts organizations. So I learned from that how much I loved that work. I was hired at MoCA Cleveland to create public programs and events inspired by their exhibitions. So here, I'm a marketing MBA. I'm not an artist, but they trusted me with that. And that was my entry into working in the arts as well, in a different capacity. I worked at MoCA Cleveland as their curator of public programs, creating events inspired by their exhibitions. And I was passionate about bringing audiences to the museum that were not connected, audiences that did not know that MoCA had something to offer, and creating those experiences that made people feel welcome and excited to be there. And that I took that passion and that same approach to the Cleveland Museum of Art. And I worked there for about 3.5 years. I'm now transitioned. I worked there as their director of public programs and director of community programs for about 3.5 years, doing the same work, but on a different scale. And I was very blessed to do that. And now I'm doing this work on an independent basis. I'm consulting. I'm working with independent artists and creative entrepreneurs, small and mid-sized nonprofit organizations to do that work. So I'm happy to elaborate on that more. I hope that wasn't too much for an intro. I just wanted to share a little bit about my background, and I'll pass it forward.
Absolutely. Do you know, when we get to following up, I'd love to hear about some of the programs that really connected with community on behalf of either MoCA or the museum, or really any of the work that you've done, but exhibits and specific work that got the word out. So think about that. Gina Washington, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm trying to synopsize this as best I can. I'm born and raised in East Cleveland, and best school system in town when I was there. And with that education, I went into music, but I didn't touch into visual arts until I got into college, right? So I left college and went into the activist field when it came to working with women. And I said to myself, I don't want to work for anybody anymore. So I went and obtained my master's. Of course, now I'm an entrepreneur as well. And I work with a collective called the Visit Arts Collective. And I guess my activism comes into play, A, just by showing up, B, with the collective. I made sure that one of our missions is, well, our mission is to make sure we bring art to, that means to me, we create exhibitions that have music, dance, poetry, the visual arts within whatever spaces we're in. And we try to represent all colors. So I have a global headset when it comes to how I bring art to people in Cleveland, specifically, as a collective. And as independent artists, my headset has always been to bring, young girls up, to instill self-esteem within them. And as an educator, my activism comes, I teach in many different nonprofits. I'm here right now at Rainey Institute. I teach at Art House Incorporated. I teach at Broadway School of Music. I did, in the past, teach at Cleveland Montessori. I don't believe in the East Side or a West Side, and that's part of my activism too. And the biggest thing I teach when it comes to children is you are the most important person in the world right now. You have to stand on your own 2 feet. So I do a serious project with them called to say who they are. They have to discover who they are by saying, I am whatever. They have to create it, draw it out, and then they have to declare it in front of everybody. Because I'm trying to get rid of that bully culture. I'm trying to get rid of the headset that someone's going to call you out your name, tell you who you are not, and it's going to take you down. And I don't want that to happen to anyone, especially young children. So if you're saying
that is really a powerful thing.
Yeah, and if you're saying it out loud to everyone, they can't tell you that that's not who you are. So you've declared it, and everybody's heard it. So if somebody's bullying you, you got friends that are going to back you up. So that's my activism right now when it comes to teaching at every stage. And
absolutely, like challenging people to speak up.
Go beyond that.
Is a universal need and talent and power, empowerment.
Exactly.
To say something.
Exactly.
Yeah. James, can you talk a little bit about your work? We haven't met, and so I'd love to learn more about you.
I just want to make sure. Can everybody hear me? Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Also, just glad to be here, step into the space. So, well, thank you for having me. I feel very welcomed. Also, what Gina was saying, that proclamation of I am that is beautiful. Also, one of my favorite De La Soul songs, like I Am I Be, Balloon Head Mind State, great song. I graduated from Shaker and 2005, and then I went to CCAD, Columbus College of Art and Design, down in Columbus for a few years, and I started a clothing company called Deaf Native, and I brought it back to Cleveland. Actually had a basically a split between the original business partner, because he wanted to do something different, but you'll still see some of our clothes out there if you're lucky. And then I just really got into street art down there, and then street art up here. And I've always been very active in like the art and music community. However, until recent events, I had not been as active as an artist, activist, disruptor, or a participant in that movement beyond like what they would call rogue organizing. But I then found that, you know, my voice could also be, you know, used and, you know, could show and shed light on certain issues that I would, you know, found to be important to me and the community as well. And I just wanted to get tapped into that. So about a year ago, started working with various organizations like the Jail Coalition, Black Spring, Safer Heights, OSA, and Midwest Culture Lab, and just found a wonderful like network of people who are all like invested in their communities and trying to see change and trying to like cut at the root of problems as opposed to treating symptoms, and using our talents, whether that be like visual, writing, music, theatrical, dance, as ways to like alleviate, express our emotions, and, you know, also help, you know, navigate through certain traumas that we've all have come to either you know, work through, or have been you know, forced upon a family member or aspect of the community, and we just wanted to bring attention to that. So I believe like as an artist, it is part of like uh, part of like a responsibility that I hold unto myself. I don't believe it's necessarily true for everybody, but to myself, it felt like, you know, use your, you know, you have these gifts, you have these talents, you know, like enlist them towards a cause that would, you know, further a better future, you know, as opposed to you know, trying to, you know, make art that, you know, exemplifies still like how frustrated, like, you know, I am on current states, trying to, you know, help others like see through their trauma to see something better, and like produce a future that isn't, you know, always cluttered by the same negativity that can hold one back or a community back. So recently we started talking with a detention center, and hopefully we'll be doing some work with some kids in a detention hall coming up, and having like workshops from like art to writing, performance, and yeah, we'll see how that goes. But it's been a wonderful journey. It's been a wonderful journey.
It sounds like there's a couple things going on there, James, but like the work being the activism, you know, doing something as an outlet, as a way of being, like being active, is a part of being an activist. You know, it sounds like you and people you work with are getting benefit out of simply the doing of the work.
I mean, it's always it's weird because I remember like towards the beginning of shutdown, like before, like, you know, all the Zoom calls and everything. Um, you know, it seemed like it was going to be harder to do like get work done. And yet, like at the same time, like people were able to mobilize themselves and like take it upon themselves, and like that own like self initiative to make things, you know, go down. So that was very encouraging, you know, like just to know like you're not out here alone, you know, like your frustrations
Absolutely.
are not harbored only to yourself. So it's easy to get it done, but like Deidre said, you know, it takes a village. So, you know, it's nice to have one out here.
That idea of community is so important to activism, you know, to be able to get people together, to be able to work together. Um, and the pandemic has been such a challenge for that. and fortunately, and thanks to Lake Erie Inc. for rising to the challenge, we can all do this through this format online, and so many other, Zoom and so many other formats online. We've been able to connect. Jim Giar, do we still have you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Maybe not. I can't see. There you are. Okay. So can you talk a little bit about yourself and your work? I see you and I hear you.
Okay, good. I'm actually a typical comic book artist. For the longest time, I was chained to my table in my studio and never really ventured out into working in comics. And I don't really consider myself an activist in the term, other than I do believe that we are on this planet not as observers. We are here to make something out of our lives. And I think the big moment for me that turned my attention towards things other than what I was working in comics was the oil spill in the Gulf. At the time, I was working at a place that there was this continuous feed of on CNN, and I'm just watching this gallons and gallons of oil pumping into the ocean. And at that time, I didn't have grandkids, but I had 2 daughters, and I got to that point where I felt I needed to do something, and I know I couldn't go down to the Gulf and stick a plug in the hole to from pumping into the ocean. But I did run across a project that was called the Ripple Project, and that was put on by an illustrator, Kelly Light. And the point of the event was they asked to contribute artwork to the site, and people could go in and purchase the artwork, but the money didn't go to Kelly's organization. It didn't go to me. What they had to do is they take the money and spend it at one of the reserves for the animals in the Gulf, the bird reserves, the turtles, and they would send this receipt back to Kelly, ship the material. And that was the first time where I created something that was above and beyond just telling stories through comics. And at that point, I began to go even further. I got involved with another project called Aftershock, which was an anthology that was put together by a gentleman in Japan. And this was right after the earthquake and the following tsunami. And it was a fundraiser. And again, I donated artwork to that strictly just because I felt the need to do something. And it's weird because I kind of fell into different things at different times. I teach classes at Bay Arts. I teach a advanced cartooning and illustration class, and then also a graphic novel class, and then art club. And that entire thing kind of fell into my lap by accident. They were looking for an instructor for a cartooning class, and I ended up taking that. And that's been about 6 years ago. And since then, teaching's kind of become my passion. Even in comics, between the two. But I teach ages anywhere from 9 to 14 in my younger classes, and then I do have the older students that are 14 to 16, 17 years old. And what I ended up finding out is, at least for me as an artist, and other artists can speak this as well, there's a certain amount of fear in creating art. And especially for children, I think it can be a little bit intimidating because you're literally laying yourself out for the world to see in your artwork. And what I try to teach in those classes is to get past that fear, realize that in creating art, you're going to fail. It's automatic. The only way you can get anywhere in your artwork is by failing, because that's how you learn. And that's true in life as well. And I struggle all my students, and also involved with the Rust Belt Monster Collective. Together, there's a total of 6 of us. We would do live painting events. Unfortunately, that was put on hold, obviously, with the pandemic last year, and it doesn't look like we used to paint at are going to happen this year. But we've done murals at the Jazz Fest every year, Ingenuity. We've painted at the Cleveland Museum of Art, and again, we would tie most of our goals into the events, or maybe in something that was in the news at the time. And again, I'm mostly in comics, but I do illustrations, single illustrations. I do want to say one thing. We did my most recent project, and it's weird how this happened, but it's a book called A More Perfect Union, which was an anthology, and it was a collection of a slice of life of people from different races, different cultures. And at the time we were putting this book together, the idea for the cover of and this goes back to my childhood, but I was always amazed when I would walk down the street, especially at night, and I would look into the houses, and I would see a lot of the houses with the lights off, except for that one single light at the top of the house. And I always wondered what was going on in there. And for the cover for this book, I envisioned houses made out of newspaper articles from different times, different years. And initially, I started on that illustration, and through certain events, the project kind of got put on hold. And eventually, by the time I started to go back into to working on this cover, is when we had the unrest in our country. It just seemed like things were getting worse and worse and worse. And I actually contacted the editor and said, you know what, I think I'm going to change directions on this, and I've got an idea that I want to do instead. And he gave me a clue on it and ended up doing the cover. I don't know if this will show her, but this was the cover. This is how it ended up. And the reason I did this is because, as I said, I'm not only a father, but I'm now also a grandfather. I think as adults, we need to take more responsibility on the country that we're building and the culture that we're building for our grandkids. And that's become more of my driving force now, probably in the last couple of years, is that, and maybe it's old age. I am getting older, and
Jim, is your camera on?
It just seems more important to me at this point. Yes, it is.
Jim, is your camera on? I'm just not able to see what you're showing us. We could see you before, but I don't actually see you now. So maybe we'll get that sorted out. So while Jim is working on that, Antonio, we also have not met, and I would love to hear your thoughts and to hear about your own work.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if the little nameplate, I think it just has my name, but this is my partner, Abby. Abby and I, we're filmmakers, storytellers, and I grew up in Cleveland Heights, so Shaker Heights, East Cleveland, all familiar with all aspects of that. But as a lot of people who grew up in that area, it's a very diverse neighborhood, but it still has its flaws and its things that it needs to improve on. We went to Cleveland State University, which is where we met. Abby was actually in the journalism program, and I was in film. But she was in the film program and then switched to journalism. But we met during that time period, and we started making projects at Cleveland State. And from there, we started West 10G Productions, which focused primarily on telling stories within the Cleveland, Ohio area that amplified this area, basically. And it was primarily focused on local businesses, nonprofits, local artists, basically any type of organization that has a mission to better the community within itself, whether it's detox centers, homeless shelters, school organizations. And so we really hit the ground running with that in 2018 after we both were working. Abby was working at Cleveland Magazine. I was with the Film Commission, and we just felt like we wanted to do more hands-on things within our community. And so we started West 10G and officially in 2018. And a lot of what everybody is saying really relates to our journey, especially with the aspect of understanding issues, especially with, you know, Black Lives Matter and the obstacles that minorities face within the communities. But it wasn't really until 2020 that we took that step into becoming full-on activists. A lot of our projects, we try to embed messages that, you know, go farther than the projects themselves, but it wasn't really until 2020 that we started that process of really honing in on putting certain messaging out, which actually led to the project that Amy approached us about, you know, wanting to talk about with you guys today. So I'll let Abby kind of talk about it, because it was essentially her idea that culminated that project. So
yeah, just I'm Abby. I'm from Tiffin, Ohio. I didn't actually grow up in Cleveland. I moved here in 2013 for college at Cleveland State. Fell in love, haven't left. So yeah, I think just to add on to what he was saying, so in the beginning when we were doing our original projects together, I think we both wanted to be activists. We were just so young and inexperienced, we weren't really sure how. But from the beginning, our mission has always been to include people that don't always get represented in the film community, which is Black people, women, LGBTQ, all of that, and telling those real authentic stories, not these like made up stereotypical stories that Hollywood seems to love. So on to how we became more active in Black Lives Matter in 2020. So obviously with the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, like a lot of these things are coming to light in the media. And I was just sitting there thinking like, geez, you know, it's kind of, I don't even know the word for it. We were just so frustrated. I think that's the only word that we can say is it's like everything kept, you know, coming to this point, and we didn't know how to work it into our art because it was so emotional for Antonio. And so we finally just were having a conversation about George Floyd, and I was like, I just am frustrated because I was reading comments on stories about him saying, you know, why didn't someone step in? Like, why didn't someone just touch that cop off of him? And I was just like, I really don't understand how that could be like a logical thought in someone's mind that a fellow, like another Black person standing there recording or watching could actually step into that. If anything, one of the white people that was sitting around probably could have said something, but who knows if that was even a possibility at the time. So from that, we thought of doing a short film that was basically throwing that scenario of if there was a Black person that was a bystander in that scenario, if they had stepped in, what would have actually happened?
And just to add on, what kind of led us to that, because, you know, COVID happened and all these things started happening. And then for Ahmaud Arbery, when that first came out, what hit me the most was the fact that it wasn't hitting the media until, what was it, 2 months, 3 months after his death. Mm-hmm. And I think that was something that really stuck with me, because it was like, how was it that this is just now coming up when there's, you know, all this footage and all this stuff that was happening, especially or reaching us in Ohio, and then, you know, Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. And then we just felt like we needed to be a part of the conversation more than what we had already been. We felt like we weren't doing enough. And so we knew about the protest that was happening downtown on May 30th. And so we went down, and for all you Cleveland natives and people who are from Cleveland probably know what happened that day.
But that's not what we were expecting. Yeah, because we brought our cameras because our thing was, well, I wanted to go and, you know, if I could use my white privilege at all to help this situation and amplify Black voices that were there, that's what I wanted to do. And Antonio wanted to go because it's important to him, and he also wanted to document, you know, what was happening that day, because that's his, you know, his passion is to document things and tell stories. So we both went there with the intent of talking to people, and just, we did not expect it to be what it was.
And it was literally that day we were coming back, tear gas in our eyes still, coming back, and we just started having a conversation in the kitchen about that entire situation. And Abby was like, you know, she came up with this idea, and I actually framed the idea, the Post-it note that I wrote when we were talking about it. I wrote out the idea, and we just started talking about it, and we just wanted to get this story told and get this project made as quickly as possible, because we just wanted it to get out. We wanted it to be heard. We wanted to use our voices the best way that we knew how, which was through our art, and through our, you know, just through our art. And so from, you know, May 30th, in a less than a month's time, we were able to get community support, get people on board within the film community as well as within the Cleveland Heights community to get this project created, which goes to, again, to what you guys are talking about in terms of community support and how important that is when it comes to activism, because without that support, it's not impossible, but it does make it harder. And one of the things that I personally, as a Black man, was most worried about was approaching the Cleveland Heights Police Department for use of a police cruiser. And I felt that was actually going to be the hardest aspect of it, just because, you know, I'm, you know, approaching them about a topic that doesn't favor the police at all, trying to get support from them and to be able to allow them to utilize one of the cruisers. And I was thankful enough to get good support from the Cleveland Heights Police Department in that project, and very streamlined for what needs we needed, which I was very thankful for, because it just, you know, it allowed us to be able to get this project out the way that we wanted to. And then in addition to that,
this project, so we should give you guys a little rundown. It's called Altruist. It's a short film. It runs about 2 minutes, tells kind of the perspective of what people were saying of what if a bystander in the George Floyd situation had stepped in, like what would have happened. So we used a lot of local talent, Conrad Miles, who's the main actor, Aaron Shepard, who was another actor. And the vibe on this set was like nothing I've ever experienced. It was, I felt like we almost should have had like a little like session afterwards to kind of decompress. But to our surprise, it's in the Cleveland National Film Festival. The reason we're surprised is because it's a really uncomfortable short. It's not fun to watch, and we didn't think that we didn't make it to get into festivals, which is usually what a filmmaker's goal is. You know, you want to get into festivals, you want to get funding. We made this strictly to put out to show people this perspective, but yeah, I think that we're really excited that more people get to see it in that format, and we potentially want to turn that into a series. But the other things that we're really passionate about. So from the beginning, we've always wanted to include people from underrepresented communities, and we're actually, this is probably the first time we're really talking about it, but we're trying to start a nonprofit that gets space located in downtown Cleveland. We're looking at a few little industrial spaces that would basically be an open space for people to come and just be artists. So I think that's something that Antonio said when he was growing up here. He really wished he could have just like gone somewhere with people who understood him as a Black artist, because that's not always that common. And we just really want to open that space up and be supportive and give them opportunity, and, you know, have little classes or screenings or painting sessions or whatever, and just basically form that like supportive community in downtown. So
we're just trying to build off of that, the original concept of, you know, West NG and our backgrounds and wanting to do more for our communities, but expanding that to activism, which is, you know, for your communities, but also outside of the community. So that's kind of where we come from. Oh, you're muted, Mike.
I really appreciate that you've been talking about specific projects and how they came about and how people responded to them, and would love to hear from some of the other people on the panel some of the specific things that they've worked on or made or connected to community, how they started and what the content or the work was, and they reached the world, how people responded to them. And I'll just put that out there generally. And if you would share with us, unmute yourself and speak up.
Well, I want to share real quick because I have to leave before everybody else does. And it was what I was describing to you guys in the chat. I'm doing a project that I'm entitling I Am, of course. And it's with the Sculpture Center and Sankofa Fine Art Plus. Everybody was charged, 12 artists were charged to create art. And that art is going to be placed in augmented reality, like Pokemon Go. And so it's not going to actually be installed in that space. And we were charged with finding in a historical spot in different neighborhoods in Cleveland. Of course, I picked East Cleveland. And of course, I picked Forest Hill Park because it's Rockefeller land. So, one of the things that I did, I photographed many different. The extended family in East Cleveland does what their group of moms and grandmoms that do whatever they can to help anybody they can in East Cleveland, especially the children. So they're holding up a slate saying, I am. And what was important about this project was on film, they had to say, I am, you are. And it became a very
Deidre, we lost you just briefly.
Yeah.
They had to say, I am.
I am.
I'm sorry, Gina, we lost you just briefly.
Yeah, they have to say, I am wonderful. I am a mom. I am powerful. And when they started to say these things on film, one of the women began to cry because it's like, you don't know that, you don't say these things out loud. You just go through space and time and you just, but to actually say it, when you put it into the universe, you make it so. It's one thing to hear it in your head, one thing to write it down, one thing to scream, one thing to sing it out. So you put it into, you're giving it energy and you're declaring it. So this will be on the bridge that separates East Cleveland and Cleveland Heights. All these
that is awesome.
I Am pictures. So
is that bridge from the two sides of the park?
Yeah, the one that goes up Forest Hill Park. That's like
that's a magnificent location.
I ride my bike through that.
Where Shaw always has their reunions. Shaw. So it should be very, that's just my piece. Then there's Ed Parker's in it, Donald Black is in it. So it's a number of people, Charmaine Spencer. Whatever art they create is going to be placed in the spaces they've chosen. So that's what I wanted to tell you.
That is sensational.
Identify as with
Gina,
the Photo Fest.
When is that happening?
That's going to happen, I think, July.
July this year.
Yeah, there's going to be a website that's specific to it, connected through the Sculpture Center, because we're getting things finished now because they have to go into the fourth wall app with Nancy Cahill. So it's going to take a minute to place things into reality.
Yeah.
So
there was a tremendous preview of that. And I can't remember exactly when this happened, but it was down in front of the county courthouse.
Oh yeah, that was
downtown.
Robin's piece. Yeah.
Robin's piece that says "Our Lives Matter."
Yeah.
Robin and I think Gary worked on that with her, right?
Yeah.
On the original mural.
Yeah.
And so you would hold up your phone in that location, and it looked through your phone like this massive mural was hanging right in front of the courthouse.
Yeah,
it was truly sensational.
And my introduction to augmented reality, not just Pokemon Go, but we at Here Rainey did a piece called Face to Face. Well, we actually taught kids this summer, in May. I've been with kids.
Yeah.
They had to write a letter to themselves 10 years in the future, and they had to make a beautiful piece of art, their face right now and their face 10 years in the future. And then they had to read the letter out loud, and we filmed that. So when you look at the painting that they created, you'll see them reading their letter, which is to themselves 10 years from now. So we have that up here at Rainey Institute right now. So that's another part of working out who you are, who you want to be, and getting your goals in place. So all those things, matter when it comes to me activating students and activating actually students are someone, from the cradle to the grave, right? Activating people to ground their psyche and empower themselves.
Yeah. I would love to hear about some other projects. Somebody tell me what some of the things that you've worked on, or one of the things that you've worked on.
I'll share a little bit. As I shared, I was working at the museum, Cleveland Museum of Art, and one point I wanted to share is that sometimes activism is taking a back seat, but creating a space for others. I was contacted, because I was working at the Cleveland Museum of Art, a lot of artists and friends and people whose work I adore who are based in Cleveland. I always champion Cleveland-based artists at the museum, at the CMA. And through the programs and experiences that I would organize at the museum, I would always engage and invite Cleveland-based artists to help lead the conversation. And so one example of that is when I was approached by Samari Rice and Amanda King about the 5-year anniversary of Tamir's death. I'm sorry, it was his birthday. It was Tamir Rice's 5 years since he had passed, and we wanted to acknowledge his birthday, and that he had been taken from us 5 years prior. So we did an event at the museum called Art, Activism, and the Legacy of Tamir Rice. And originally, the way things kind of work traditionally at the CMA, where we usually charge rentals and there are fees associated, and there's calendars that are planned 18 months in advance, and so it's difficult. But I was passionate about this event happening. I was passionate about the Rice family has suffered enough, and that Cleveland, we owe this family, and that we need to make space for this event to happen. And so I was able to get the ear of executive staff to make this event happen. So we presented, I was honored to work with Ms. Rice and Amanda King of Shooting Without Bullets to create an event that was beautiful, and it celebrated Tamir and all the contemporary artists in different parts of the world, different parts of the country that have been touched by what happened here in Cleveland. And it was a program that was in the museum's auditorium. It was 800 people deep in the audience. There was dance, there was poetry, there were words from religious and political officials. And it was just an honor to have that space and unveil plans at the museum, plans for the Tamir Rice Afrocentric Cultural Center that will be opening later this year. And so for me, as an arts administrator, just saying, hey, we need to listen and support our community and live up to the values that we say we represent, and have this event at the museum. So, that's just one example of how we take a leadership role and just speak up and do what we say, do what we know needs to be done for the sake of our community, for the sake of our healing, because oftentimes that doesn't happen, and so just making that happen and making it happen at the museum, because we knew it would get even more attention, that message would be amplified, was really important, and I was really honored to support and help make that happen. So
I love hearing that story of being a person in a big system with a lot of inertia, the museum is, but being able to steer all that capacity towards something important. That's awesome, and it's definitely a part of art activism, like to play that kind of role and make possibility for other folks. Can we hear about somebody else's project? I could put that out another way. I'd love to hear if there was a specific thing that inspired you. James?
Oh, well,
were you raising your hand?
Well, I was going to speak towards one of the projects, but I could also speak to what inspired it as well. So I will run.
Well, do both. Like, I would love to hear about the project.
I will run both responses in tandem. So I was fortunate enough to be a part of a artist residency for OSA, and one of the projects was supposed to be, you know, just like using your art, as well as like how you're going to use your art and incorporate that with activism and the community. And my brother works with America Scores, and America Scores is it's a program that like teaches soccer skills and like literacy skills, but like with writing, you know, team building, and then also like reading and like, you know, just linking athletics with like poetry and art. And usually what they do every year is they have an inspired art. They have an inspired art event in which, you know, various kids, like, you know, they'll write poems, and then, you know, various artists will like get paired with a poem and then do an illustration, or painting, or, you know, however they want to, you know, however they feel like getting down. So I thought it would be cool that, like, I know usually they have like an inspired art event, and it was canceled this year, you know, due to various reasons. I was like, hey, like, let's take this time to like make like a nice little like illustrated book, because like I was always a huge fan of like poetry with illustration. Like Shel Silverstein was like one of my favorite poets, and then like, you know, like Honey I Love, like that was like one of my favorite poetry books. And like I remember the illustrations were just amazing. So just took 25 poems from like just to start, and then did illustrations for each. And so now it's building up to like 30 different poems, and then there's also going to be a auction at the end of May. So there'll be a poetry slam, and then there'll be a inspired art like auction for the program, and then also that chat book will be released with all the poetry at the same time. So, and then all the money will go to the program. But I mean, like a lot of the illustrations, it was hard to do some of them, because some of the poems, like, even though they're coming from, you know, like fourth graders, like they're heavy, like they're real heavy. And like to do the poem justice, and then also like, you know, make sure it also like holds up to like the, you know, the severity of like what they're talking about. And then it was an experience. So you know, if you ever feel like you're lacking in inspiration, like definitely look to the youth, because they'll turn the light on for you. Like if you're feeling like you're in the dark, like they'll be like, hey, like they'll shine that truth. They'll just come out just unabashedly true. Just it's awe-inspiring. So yeah, I'll definitely say the youth. The variants.
There's I want to give a shout out to a project, and then ask y'all another a follow-up. There's an exhibit on view now at Deep Roots Experience Gallery, which is at East 79th and Central, if you haven't been there. And the person who runs that is David Ramsey. The exhibit now is called Who Are Your Heroes? And the subjects of those, the heroes that people chose, range from like world famous. There's a portrait of Martin Luther King by Tony Green. There's a portrait of Nat King Cole by Krista Freehands. And then people who are more locally known, the photographer Donald Black has a portrait of Jan Ridgway, who's a library administrator who got involved at the Garden Valley Association as a volunteer and basically organized to save that organization from some financial trouble. And another photo of Quentin Durham, who was a contractor who started a school to teach building trades to people of color to help them get jobs, because he'd noticed on job sites himself that the number of people of color who had those skills had significantly declined. There's a portrait of Fred Hampton, who was the Chicago or the Illinois chairman of the Black Panthers. There's and then a guy named Craig Singleton, who I don't know, did a portrait of his Aunt Mary. And a thing that struck me about that is that the range of those people, there are some international world famous people in that group of heroes. And then there are some people who we know in Cleveland or around a neighborhood. And then some very, intimate relationships, like with your aunt. And honestly, in that whole show, the one that struck me the most was that portrait of Craig Singleton's Aunt Mary, because I have aunts that I look up to who wrote letters to me when I was a kid. We carried on long dialogue through written letters that we put in the old school U.S. mail back and forth for years. And so what I wanted to throw out to all you guys is to ask, who are your heroes? Who are the people that you look up to, and what caused that? So again, I'll just put that out to the whole crew, and when you're ready, unmute yourself and jump in.
I'm going to start again because I got to go. There are two people. One is Joan Southgate, because she walked the path of the Underground Railroad and started the Restore Cleveland Hope and saved the Cosette Bates House, illuminating the fact that, Cleveland was the crossroads and a place of hope. The other person, very dear to my heart, was my grandfather, who I took care of until he passed at the age of 99. And he was the most open-minded, even-toned human being on the planet, took care of me when I was pregnant, never said a bad word about anybody. People would tell him whatever, you know what I mean? And isn't a lot, so he was like, he grounded me. He was a tinker fairy, built things, created things. And my daughter and him, an intergenerational household, is magnificent. So my daughter and him were like this. And the day he died,
awesome.
She was okay with it, because she was like, he has lived stories. So, those are the two people that I towards as my heroes. And you guys, I want to say thank you for this amazing panel. I love you all. Got to know some of you guys. I hope to see you again. I'm going to say goodbye to the panel and those who are listening. I hope you guys have a wonderful, absolutely wonderful day, because spring has sprung. So get outside. Okay?
Yeah.
Get some vitamin D. So I'm going to sign off.
Thank you so much, Gina.
You guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Gina.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Gina. Have a great day.
You too.
So the answer, I just wanted to answer to tune in on the person who inspired me. Me specifically, person who always comes to mind for me is definitely my dad. Aside from getting me into movies and showing me, this, that, and the other on that aspect, both my parents worked with, grew up teaching. They both were teachers, and they worked with disabled kids or at-risk kids in the Cleveland community. And my dad ran a group home for disabled teenagers and adults. And the person that I grew up most with was, his name was Ulysses. And it always tickles my dad that I remember this, but I was maybe in middle school, 6th, 7th grade, But I would always remember Ulysses. He was confined to a wheelchair. He needed help, making his way around. He couldn't really speak too well. And what my dad would do, he would bring me along. We'd go to the movies naturally. We'd go to the park. We'd go to the mall when malls were a thing, really. Richmond Mall and everything. And as a kid, I always, since I was around Ulysses so much, he was just a person. He's just like me. He was in a wheelchair. He was hard of speech, but it was always, it was weird that when we were out and about, people would point fingers at him, would tease him, and would make fun of him and whisper things while we were waiting in line for popcorn or whatever. And I would always, wonder why that was. I didn't understand why people looked at him differently just because of how my dad treated him and treated people that had disabilities like that. And that was something that stayed with me. It's still with me to this day. And the way that the way that you treat people that don't look like you, that don't have the same abilities that you may have, that you take advantage of, whether it's walking or speech or the ability to, write or whatever it may be. That was something that I feel like at a young age, without him knowing, I feel like that was something that affected and impacted me the most and influenced the way that I approach situations, the way I approach people, the way I approach, our art, now, especially when our art is something that we want to reach and communicate as much to as many people as possible, and understanding that not everybody processes or views things the same way you do. And it's, trying to bridge that gap. So that's something that stuck with me and it tickles my dad to this day that I still remember Ulysses and going to the movies and all that. Even though at the time I know I was probably a handful to go, but I definitely appreciate the fact that he did at the end of the day bring me along, and not just with Ulysses, but all of his clients. Ulysses was just the first one that I actually remember. It's in my earliest memory of that. So just wanted to.
Yeah.
And then I was gonna, chime in too. Similar to him, I have family that inspires me. My mom's parents, my grandma's name was Pauline Bird, and then my grandpa's name was Martin White Eagle Bird Jr. He was Native American. I didn't get to know him very well, but lately, since I've been older, I've really been digging into my roots there, which has been so inspiring and absolutely insane that I can see where a lot of my facial features come from, things like that. But they had a daughter named Norma who had Down syndrome, and she was my best friend. And I think that's similar to Antonio with Ulysses. Me having my Aunt Norma just completely changed how I am as a person. I think I'm much more patient, much more kind, much more grateful because of her. And I don't know, she was the best person ever. So
we have about 5 minutes that we can keep talking. We're a little over time, and we're going to take it right up to the limit before the next session is going to start. So if other folks would like to talk about who they look up to, who are your heroes, we'd love to hear.
I'll share briefly. One of my heroes, I have a long list, and my mother and my father are warriors. I mean, they're definitely on that list. Both my mother was born and raised in Detroit, and she introduced me to music and arts and culture. And just growing up in civil rights era Detroit really made an impact on her. My mother always collected every issue of Jet magazine, Ebony magazine growing up, and my dad used to tease her for it. But then when I went to visit the National Museum of African American History and Culture, also known as the Blacksonian in Washington, D.C., guess what they had on view as art, as collectibles? All those magazines. So my mother introduced me to art culture, not just classical music. I'm a classically trained violinist. She used to go hear the Cleveland Orchestra Friday matinees when I was a kid. And I ended up working at the Cleveland Orchestra in their marketing department. So musically, but also just Black culture. My father also was raised in poverty. He was a sharecropper. He was told he would never amount to anything. He worked in college cleaning toilets and bathrooms at a segregated school in Indiana, Anderson University. He picked himself up and he went to University of Michigan, got his medical degree, and he inspired young Black and brown doctors to become physicians here in Cleveland. And he made it possible for me to become everything that I'm doing today. All the sacrifices that they made so that I could be a musician, go to school on a full scholarship as a musician, come back to Cleveland and work in the arts in different capacities. The sacrifices they made for me to get to that place were stay with me forever. And I will always try to carry that forward for other young people. So
that is awesome.
Guess I'll just say real quick, I always got to shout out my brother, even though people sometimes get us confused. Once you meet us, we're totally different people. But I also got to shout out my mom. My mom is one of the strongest people ever. And then like my auntie Unita, like she's over 95, so acts like she ain't a day over 60. It's like, I don't worry. All I do is I get my rest, I drink my tea, and I pray. I don't worry. I love her to death. And then my uncle Lee, who was her late husband, he was a Tuskegee Airman, came back to Toledo, ran his own barbershop until he died, had a bunch of kids, he used to drive us around to every track meet, always kept us fresh and looking good. And, thank y'all. Thank fam. Wow.
I love the degree to which people are looking up to their family in this group. I want to close. We've got we're gonna come in just under the wire. I want to close just by leaving y'all with a question. My friend Julie Patton, who lives over in Glenville, has been active in different ways through her life, including in her neighborhood, including preserving some green space there, and creating space for artists in her building there. And a thing that she said to me once that just stuck with me, and I've quoted it repeatedly, and I don't think that she meant it that way. I think she was just talking, and I think maybe it surprises her that I've rolled this out once in a while and brought it back to her. And, and I did check with her to be sure it was okay that I repeat what she said. She said, the most radical thing you can do is be yourself. And so for panelists and for all the people here as I close, I just want to put that quote out. The most radical thing you can do is be yourself, and think about what that means. So thank you, everybody, for doing this. I love hearing what inspires you all and about the work that you've done. And it's been an honor to be here. And thank you, Amy, for building this whole amazing program. This panel discussion is a little piece of the whole weekend. So you go. And I look forward to seeing you all around town.
hopefully,
Yeah, you
yes.
guys could not have started this off in a better way. We'll send you the link. We're going to put it up on our YouTube channel. You all have links. You can go in and out of anything else you want. Just so you know, once we get you in the Lake Erie Inc. door, it's really hard to leave. So just know you're gonna see and hear from us again, and deeply appreciate you being part of this event. Thank you.
Yeah, Abby and I would love to have everybody's contact so we could, hopefully
Yes.
sooner rather than later get together once everything calms down with COVID and all that. And, once we're all relatively back to normal, we'd love to be able to get together with everybody for sure.
I just got vaccinated, so
Yeah, we're
halfway.
halfway. We're halfway.
Me too.
Vaccinated.
Yes.
halfway there.
I'm there.
It's out here.
Yeah.
All right. I think we've all got each other's emails.
Yep.
Quarles, yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
put it in.
DJ.
You can also reach out to any of me or Mike, and we'll make sure that you guys all are connected together.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fabulous.
All right, thank y'all.
Thank you, everybody.
Y'all have a blessed one. Mwah.
Thanks,
Yeah,
James.
I love that voice, James.
I know.
Bye-bye.
See ya.